Welcome to the May 25th PSTA board meeting. As you can see, Darden Rice is not here. She is on vacation, I believe. So I'm filling in for her. So we welcome all of you here today. I will ask...
And here.
Just to give you a little heads up, under public comment, normally, I think the way things have been done is we usually don't accept public comment under the informational items, but because they're pretty important to everybody, we're going to go ahead and allow public comment under those two informational items that are later in the agenda. So for public comment, in a few minutes, you can speak to the committee updates and consent agenda and director reports, and otherwise the action items and informational items you can speak at the time that we talk about those agenda items. So having said that, Janet, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Janet. All right, so we'll move right into public comment. Mr. Rask, who is also taking 3 minutes from Sully. You have 6 minutes. Rachel, can you set that clock for a second?
Do I start?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing comment under information items. They are two very important items today. A lot of things to cover today. I want you all to know that HART will be discussing and possibly voting on whether to seek an Attorney General opinion on the issue of lobbying. They will do so on June 6th. And don't take my word for it, you can confirm it with Catherine Egan, their CEO. I don't know if Mr. Zimmett or any of you have a copy of the memo that their general counsel, David Smith, wrote on that issue, but if not, I'll get it for dense reading. But very briefly, every case will depend on the special act that created the agency, the particular circumstances, so it's going to be different than in your case, but the same reasoning applies, and that is whether lobbying is expressly and specifically authorized. Mr. Smith is not opposed to seeking an Attorney General opinion after you heard my take on it, and I would hope that you would also look to seek an Attorney General opinion. I would like you to put this on your agenda for a future board meeting. I will not attend the next two board meetings, but please consider it. We're going to get later to the issue of buses and your sustainability plan. I just briefly wanted to mention something that I discussed with Mr. Scott, and that is that if you're struggling to buy new buses, why don't you conserve them by driving them less? In other words, cut the revenue miles. On the consent agenda items, just to read into the public record some of the comments that I made in an email to the board. The Almerton Road Park building demolition, the disrepair there is caused by agency neglect. No private entity would have allowed that to happen. So therefore, I asked, let's not cry over spilled milk, but let's make sure we don't spill any more milk. Ask what other buildings are in disrepair and what has to be done to ensure that more do not fall into disrepair. It could have been leased out, it never was. On the issue of boardroom audiovisual equipment, I want to thank Commissioner Johnson for clarifying that as far as why it was rescinded. And on transportation disadvantage contracts, I don't understand why these contracts have increased 6% over last year, given that we supposedly have low inflation. That's what they tell us in Washington. and out of Tallahassee. And also fuel costs have dropped since last year. For those of you who sit on our MPO, please speak to Mr. Blanton, because as I documented in my email, he has made some quite misguided statements to the press. One of them was, I think it probably makes it more likely that you'd have a cross-bay connection for light rail, he meant, if you had a funding mechanism in place and a commitment from both counties to provide funding. In other words, sounds like he's advocating for a tax hike or more spending at the very least. And as I said in my email, Mr. Blanton needs to understand that light rail is dead in this county. And that 90% of auto trips in Pinellas, Hillsborough, Pasco, doesn't matter where you look, they originate and end within the county. So we don't need these cross-bay connections he's talking about. Also, I discussed the following with Mr. Miller before the meeting. I just want you to understand how a member of the public, probably many members of the public, look at something like this when PSTA puts it out. This is page 83 of your agenda packet. It says at the top, need to expand services. Whose need? The public's need. We have declining ridership, seriously declining ridership. So whose need is it? Is it the need of bus drivers who need a job? Is it the need of the bus manufacturers, electric bus manufacturers, who perhaps donate to the Sierra Club? And then it says newspaper/editorials. The implication is that PSTA somehow can shape these. Now, Mr. Miller, when I talked to him before the meeting, he doesn't agree with that, but that's how it can look like to the public. Whose needs are being served here? So I'll have more comments later. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Okay, I'm going to deviate a little bit. Mr. Walters Wapicki says he cannot stay for our presentation later and wanted to give his comments on electric buses.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Miller, members of the board. Good morning. Just wanted to touch up briefly on the exploration of battery electric buses. I do applaud PSTA once again for doing the research needed to come this far. But I still think that not enough is being done to seriously explore the possibility of at least buying 2 battery electric buses and the necessary infrastructure needed to power those buses. It really doesn't take rocket scientists to figure out that the benefits of these buses will be far-reaching, far beyond a fleet of 35 straight diesel buses. It just seems that some within PSTA still have not figured out that concluding that straight diesel is the way to go is the right direction. No, it's not. It's the wrong direction. Straight diesels are not clean. They fill the air with smog, and as appealing as they may look on cost, it doesn't save a lot of money in the long run because you're still going to spend a lot more money in maintenance, especially when those buses get old. The other thing is that the mentality seems to still stand that these buses are not going to be able to run on the bulk of the PSTA system. That's wrong too, because there's a variety of routes, such as the 5, the 7, the 22, that these buses can run on. They're not extraneously long routes. And if the October service changes go through and some of the longer routes are split up, you can put the buses on those routes as well because they're going to be shortened. So I am urging the PSTA board, especially those who are serving on the county commission, please continue to seriously consider these buses and allocate the resources needed to get the charging station, whatever other required infrastructure, and the 2 buses. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Compton.
Good morning. Phil Compton, Sierra Club, 1990 Central Avenue, St. Petersburg. Just want to say thanks to Commissioner Ken Welch and Mayor Buchowski for coming out and participating in the Hands Across the Sand event on Treasure Island at the Bilmar on Saturday, where lots of people formed a gigantic human sun with the words 100% clean energy. It was a pretty amazing thing, and I'm practically surprised that we pulled it off that way, because you can actually read those words. We tend to think of solar power's potential to replace coal and natural gas as something that can power our buildings. But let's not forget, it can also replace the oil that we now use to power our vehicles, and also the natural gas that some people use to power vehicles. 6 years ago, let's not forget, the Deepwater Horizon oil was threatening our $6 billion beach tourism industry here in Pinellas County, and we were very lucky to miss getting that oil on our Pinellas beaches. If the weather had been different, if it had been a different time of year, the scientists at USF College of Marine Science assure us we would have been nailed by that. And today, it hasn't got much publicity, but there are those in the U.S. Senate who would remove the federal protection that our Gulf Coast uniquely enjoys, and Senator Bill Nelson is once again fighting for us to preserve that protection. We can all make our homes and offices more efficient. We did that at Sierra Club 4 years ago with the Net Zero Energy Office, and we should all check out the new EVs that don't use any oil. But there is something only you can do. There's something that you have the opportunity to do. On behalf of Sierra Club, I want to applaud Commissioner Welch's proposal to the Board of County Commissioners recently to provide PSTA with just a bit of the county's BP settlement funds for the purpose of acquiring electric bus charging stations. We urge you who are on the BOCC to also support Commissioner Welch's proposal, and for the rest of you to add your voices in support of what to us seems to be the most appropriate, fitting way to use these funds to help ensure that the threat of oil drilling off our shores never materializes here by eliminating your demand for this source of supply of oil, to show Florida and the world how to do that, and to show the world how they too can take action today that will help save our beaches tomorrow. There truly isn't time to delay. This isn't an idea that can be placed back on the shelf in the hopes that you might do it someday. Thanks to Commissioner Welch, that day can come this year, not years down the road, and Sierra Club really does look forward to working with the board and the staff here to help you realize that shift to the types of buses that your passengers will love and your bottom line will adore as well. And I'll have more specific remarks on this issue in a little while. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Okay, I don't see any other cards. Did we miss anybody for public comment? We'll move on to our committee updates. Our first item is Transit Riders Advisory Committee, Elaine Mann. Welcome.
Morning. Vice Chairman Buchowski, Mr. Miller, esteemed board members, the Transit Riders Advisory Committee met on Tuesday, May 17th. Henry Lukasik, PSTA Director of Maintenance, presented the recommended revisions to the Almerton Park and Ride. The Park and Ride is to be updated and upgraded, including removal of the derelict building currently occupying the property. A central island with a landscaped public space and new bus shelters will be constructed to improve the rider experience and bus circulation. Committee discussion focused on accessibility of parking spaces for the physically challenged and safety of riders as they traverse from the parking area. The site plan has taken those items into consideration. Recommendation from TRAC also addressed utilizing this improvement to create a marketing and PR campaign to increase ridership from this designated park and ride. The Transit Riders Advisory Committee unanimously endorsed approval of a contract with JM 520 for construction and improvements at the Almerton Park and Ride. PSTA staff Bob Lasher, Christine McFadden, and Juan Luvian then updated us on the June and October service improvement rollout. The PSTA is intent on providing maximum service to the ridership. Town hall workshops were held throughout the month of May to obtain and respond to rider feedback. The grid system is being instituted where possible. Route efficiencies are lending themselves to create more coverage and service span. Service is being restored to Crystal Lakes Manor and Magnolia Gardens. The October improvements will continue to streamline service and create efficiencies. TRAC is in support of the recommended changes. Discussion demonstrated concern for the lack of direct service to the new Clearwater Countryside Library. Since the library's moved from a regular route, it is only accessible through specific requests to the connector that services that area. Staff has followed up since track and is looking into the potential for providing regular service to the library. We invite all of you to attend our next meeting on Tuesday, June 14th at 4 p.m. here at the PSTA. And for those of you whose schedules don't allow, we encourage you to view the video of the track meeting online at the PSTA website. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn. Are there any questions or comments for Lynn? Okay. Thank you so much for your service. All right, our next item is the Metropolitan Planning Organization update, and that would be me. At our last meeting, we talked about our transportation improvement program and an amendment. You all will remember what was added to it is the Tampa Bay Express TBX bridge for in Pinellas County from the bridge to North Canyon Boulevard. You all will remember that PSTA as well as MPO, it's all submitted letters of concern that the bridge, or that the that this project and the toll lanes wouldn't go all the way to downtown St. Petersburg. They are recommending it be added to the TIP in phases. This is the first phase. They're going to go for a second phase. We are going to hear a presentation next at the next meeting in regards to the whole thing, and MPO is looking to do a resolution of support for the project. I'm waiting to hear what everybody has to say, because I know we're all been very concerned about not getting that in the first phase of the project. It might need 5-10 years down the road before we get a second phase. Although I do know they're looking at shoulder options for buses and that type of thing. I just want you to know that I'm still trying to adamantly support in the project that it goes all the way to downtown St. Pete. I know Chairman Rice is doing the same. So that's one update. US 19, the FDOT staff presented the agency's policy on complete streets. They want to do this on US 19 and all of the other streets that they manage. As time goes on, as projects are redone, they want to have bike lanes and better sidewalks and all of those types of things that fall into this complete streets model as funding and time becomes available. I think that'll be exceptionally important as we are coming up. They're getting ready to do, or in the process of doing, a study on Alt 19, and so they'll need to be looking at those kind of issues on Alt 19, which is very narrow in some spots. So that those updates that they might do to Alt 19 over the next 5 or 10 years may dramatically change with this new policy, as well as US 19. So it's something to watch. The other thing is that MPO has sent a letter to FDOT asking them to delay designing the overpasses for North County on US 19. FDOT has not responded yet, so they are still working on the design phase of these North County interchanges. And the Pasco MPO is coming to our meeting in June to talk about all of this, and that they have voted to remove all of their overpasses from the US 19 project. So we don't really know where all of this is at. There's a lot of political fighting going on about who wants MPO being improved or not improved. I mean MPO, US 19 being improved or not improved, and the way it should be done. So pretty impacting stuff for our community and family. So let's keep an eye on that. And MPO and PSTA will be meeting on July 29th, as you know, in a joint workshop. Whit will talk to us, Whit Blanton from MPO will talk to us about the performance-based outcome-driven planning process. This concept would provide MPO a better prioritization method that will properly weigh investments in public transit with other transportation modes. As follow-up to an earlier request, the MPO and PSTA will both be asked to support board member participation in Transportation for America's leadership program as well. So lots of big things going on. And if you can attend or watch these meetings, I think it would be beneficial for those who are not on the board.
I just want to make everyone on the board aware that on Friday, Whit Blanton is the keynote at our Tiger Bay luncheon, and it's all about transportation, so that should be very interesting as well.
Very good.
Madam Chair,
Uh-huh.
if I may comment on one thing that was brought up at the MPO meeting, there was a brief statement by one of the people there talking about that DOT is continuing to move forward with a pedestrian overpass at Harn
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Boulevard in R19. In discussing that with her, after the meeting, part of the story is that they are looking at, rather than putting it at Harn, to flexing it someplace north of Harn in order to save some money on relocating the variable message sign. And it was, I find that a little ironic because at previous DOT meetings, they have talked about how people will walk maybe 200 feet out of their way to cross, but otherwise they'll just find a way to cross otherwise. And it was at that same meeting that they were talking about for DOT policy for complete streets to recognize pedestrian. So I would urge our representative to MPO to recall, have DOT recall the two resolutions that PSTA sent in, and I think 206 and 07, to ask the DOT's 19 project design is to be supportive of transit. So there's a couple comments.
And you're right, and I apologize for missing that. They were talking about at these intersections, these North County intersections that they're designing overpasses for. We've been talking a lot about how do people cross the road and what's the best way, and they were showing us all these different options, whether it's a pedestrian overpass or an underpass, if you will, and other different options. And it appeared to me that they were really thinking about some of these things in the after, rather than designing the project to accommodate. And so there was discussion about that, and I will ask Brad to provide me with those resolutions that Bill is referring to, and we should probably look at that and maybe do a letter from PSTA to the MPO and FDOT about that, because there was concern expressed at the meeting about the way they were going about this. And I think the problem is they're designing US 19 so early. They looked at their design options, and then when the final building of that piece of it comes so late, so much later, that these issues are afterthoughts. And it's not a design and then build it right away like you would do in your own city. So, okay. Any other questions on what's going on at MPO? Alrighty. Now we have the MPO's Global Coordinating Board, Patty Johnson.
The local coordinating board met on May the 17th at the offices of the Pinellas County Planning Department in downtown Clearwater. And the highlights of that meeting include, but are not limited to, a presentation by the Pinellas County Schools Homeless Emergency Action Team. It's called HEAT. And this has to do with the children that are homeless and getting them to the schools where they started and keeping them in one school. About how many school children are homeless, what transportation and other challenges that they face. An update from the American Cancer Society about their transportation services for those undergoing cancer treatment. The FDOT staff advised the LCB of their efforts to create an interactive map of all the 5,310 funded agencies with a profile of the trips that they provide. Approval of annual agency agreements, funding allocations, rate model, and the Transportation Disadvantaged Service Plan update. Ross Silvers advised the group of what PSTA is going to propose in 2 new grant applications. The Mobility Enhancement Grant from the Florida Transportation Disadvantaged Commission and the Rides to Wellness Grant from the Federal Transit Administration. The LCD created a subcommittee to provide input on this grant. And thanks to PSTA's leadership, we are bringing more dollars to Pinellas County for the transportation disadvantaged. And not one meeting goes by that we are not reminded or told of all the people that do not have transportation, that need transportation, that don't know how to get there and to do it. So our teaching is of great importance to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any questions or comments for Patty? Okay. We will move to consent agenda. There are 5 items on consent agenda: the board meeting minutes, the Ulmerton Road Park and Ride, AV equipment, transportation disadvantaged contracts, and the nomination of some track members. Are there any items to be pulled? All right.
Madam Chairman, I would move approval of the consent agenda.
Second. Thank you. Is all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Move on to our action items. The first item is the 2015 annual audit. I will turn it over to Debbie.
Thank you very much. We'll pull up the PowerPoint.
Madam Chair, as you can see, Debbie is our Chief Financial Officer and not our independent auditor. The auditor, as she'll explain, they are going to try to be here a little bit later, but go ahead.
Thank you. I am Debbie Leas, Chief Financial Officer here at PSTA, and I'm very pleased today to be able to do this presentation. Clifton Larson Allen is running a bit behind schedule and got detained, so they will be here a little bit later. Should any of the board members have any questions that I cannot answer, or they want to ask directly to the auditors. This is the first year.
Question. I'm sorry, I apologize. Are they coming this morning?
They are coming.
We were going to postpone, but Debbie wanted to go ahead and present.
If they're going to be here, why don't we just wait till they get here? Let them present.
I'm not sure what time they will be here, but they will be here later.
I'm just a little bit worried we might lose a quorum, but
Okay. It's important to hear from
We
our
were
independent
originally
auditors.
going to postpone, but there was a concern about if they would get here, and we were already pretty late.
Yeah, I think the report is a positive one, so I'm not,
Yeah.
but I still think it's important that we get a chance to have them speak. So hopefully we'll make some time for them to, all right.
Proceed?
It might be more efficient to see if they come and then
we can do that. We can wait. Just get us to the end of the action items, please.
Madam Chair, may I ask respectfully, what is the concern if we postpone it? It's an audit, correct?
Correct.
What is the concern if we postpone it until we can hear from them?
Oh, I don't, it's just to keep on schedule, and it's been a tag team with the two of us to do the presentation, so in their absence, I thought we could go ahead while we still had everybody here. But we can postpone.
It is an action item. The Finance Committee did hear from the auditors at their last week's meeting and got the full presentation, but I'm perfectly comfortable delaying it into the meeting to the end of the action items and seeing if they're here by whenever we get to that, probably around 10 o'clock or so.
Madam Chair, well, considering the comments that Brad just made and in an effort to be prudent about the way in which we operate, I would suggest that it might be a good idea to just postpone it and hear from them. And frankly, I find it a bit odd, given this is a really important issue, that, you know, I know life happens and things happen, but it is their responsibility to come before us, and I'd like to hear from them.
It's fine, we'll wait.
We'll see if they,
So are you suggesting we postpone it to another meeting?
Well, yes,
Okay.
I think, I mean, I'm only one voice, but I agree with Commissioner Eggers that it is a bit odd. That's not, respectfully, I say,
No, you're right, they report to us.
Yeah, that you're not an independent outside person.
Understood.
Yes.
I concur with my colleagues on the left. Either move it later today, and if they're not here later today in time, move it to another meeting.
So that's what we'll do.
Yeah.
Let's just move it to at the end of action items, and if they do not come, then we'll postpone it to the next meeting. All right, thank you, Debbie. Somebody remind me to go back to that. All right, item B is the security training services. Brad?
yeah, Madam Chair, members of the board, good morning. I'll go ahead and talk about this item, and then I've got both Mike Loss and Debbie Leas who can answer any other questions about it. I want to thank the Finance Committee who has reviewed this a couple of times. This is an action item to approve of 2 consultant contracts to perform training, security training for our own employees, as well as develop a tabletop exercise to conduct with first responders in the community, fire departments, police departments, etc. The Finance Committee was helpful to me in reviewing this item, and since this is a grant-funded training program by the Transportation Security Administration, we are specifically designing these contract awards to be narrowly tailored to only be used for this training services. Again, the training is for our bus drivers and mechanics on security-related, being aware of security issues. 2 4-hour training sessions were funded by the grant, and then this development of this training for first responders and a functional drill to be happen in the next 2 or 3 years. So the Finance Committee did review this item, recommends its approval. It is very specifically for this training. If there's money left over in the grant or other things that PSTA would need to be done, we would have to come back to the board to get that approval to do anything but this training.
Madam Chair?
Did you want Mike to give a presentation?
No.
No, okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes, questions for staff?
I just want to mention that the Finance Committee unanimously approved recommendation of these 2 contracts to the full board.
Any questions for staff? All right. Can we go to public comment, please?
Sorry.
If it was something on security training, maybe not. Okay, this is a public hearing. Anyone that would like to come forward and speak to this, please feel free to do so.
Should have stated my name before. Tom Rascon, Incorporated, Pinellas County. I thought I gave you guys a card, but perhaps I didn't. Just to organize my notes here. Mr. Barclay mentioned that this contract was unanimously approved in the Finance Committee. I just want to note that on other issues, when it comes to bus purchases, he's gone against the majority. So I would ask that you at least ask some tough questions here about this contract. Because as I pointed out in my email, there are some security issues here at PSTA, at least from the taxpayer's perspective. I mentioned that in your January meeting, you hired a sheriff's deputy at taxpayer expense, and this person, if you look at the video, which I have not been able to because it's exempt from the public records law, but I observed that this deputy sat behind the counter and played on his phone pretty much the whole meeting. We taxpayers were paying for that. That's not security. I mean, As I said in my email, the Unabomber himself that walked in here and set off the bomb. So as part of approving this contract, please make sure that you make a statement, that the board makes a statement, that all security employees and contractors must be taught alertness while on duty. Otherwise, we're just paying for security. It becomes a block checking exercise. I did this, I did this, I did this, but you haven't actually accomplished security or safety. And those are my only comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rice. Anyone else who wanted to come forward and speak to this item? Okay, I'll go back to Brad. I think you had maybe some comments on that issue.
Oh, well, Mr. Harrigan, I would certainly agree if that was a concern. We have had security here at the PSP meetings, and I am very appreciative of the Sheriff's Department that they have not charged us for that, for providing a deputy. It's not an excuse for them if they weren't paying attention, but I see James Bradford. I think perhaps maybe you talked to him before. We'll make sure that we talk to them when they come in.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve this?
Move to approve.
Second.
Thank you. Any final comments? Start down this end. Anyone on this end? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Our next item is the 2017 Program of Projects that was discussed in the Planning Committee. Debbie. Welcome
Good
back.
morning again. The Federal Transit Administration requires that PSTA publish a program or program of projects that we will be using with their federal apportionment funds. We held a public hearing right here at PSTA on May 18th. We did receive one comment there, and that was from Ms. Hazelton. And she has requested that PSTA consider purchasing less expensive, smaller shuttle vehicles. And I would like to say that in our program of projects, we actually do have money set aside for that. The program of projects this year is a little bit different than we presented in the past in that the 2015 numbers were actually, we only got a portion of our funds last year. And by the time the federal government got around to giving us the balance of the funding, they shut down the system they use to input a new software system. So we had to postpone bringing this to the board until this point in time. And of course, it's an election year, so we have our full apportionment of the 2016 funds all in once. So this is a listing of the program of projects. It is consistent with supporting the mission of PSTA. It includes money for buses, not by any specific type. It includes money for passenger amenities, so we are very customer-centered focused. We also have funds in there to support our workforce through training, and we also have quite a bit of money in there for technology improvements. And what we're asking today is that you approve the program or projects that we may be able to apply for this funding. Our deadline for application is June 30th, so that we may be able to receive the funds starting with our new fiscal year. And that is the action item before you.
Hang on just one second. Commissioner Welch, any comments from the Planning Chair? Planning Chair?
No, Ms. Leo's covered it. I'll just reemphasize that it doesn't specify the types of replacement buses we purchased. I do have a question after.
Okay. Going on, questions for staff? Commissioner Owen?
Yes, Debbie, it may be in here and I'm just missing it, but I was very concerned, and several of my colleagues on the county commission are concerned as well, about making sure that one of those smaller vehicles is in the Lealman community, because that area has no public transportation. That is our focus for our new CRA that we have there. And I think I can speak that we all agree that that is a real necessity for that community, for them to be able to get to, they don't even have a grocery store there. So to be able to have public transportation in that community is essential for their quality of life. Is one of those buses earmarked for that? I'd spoken to Brad about it earlier, and he seemed to think so. Did I misunderstand him?
This is the capital grant to buy bus shelters and buses. It doesn't specifically require us to say where the buses will run, but we are, as Debbie mentioned, we are purchasing smaller shuttle-like vehicles that very well could run in the Lowland community. Our planning department is working on a service plan on how we might do that if funding is identified.
May I have a follow-up? So at what point in our process, or what is the appropriate mechanism for me to bring that up again?
Later in the meeting, Cassandra is going to be walking through the service changes and plans we have for different areas of the county coming up over the next year, and I think you should bring it up then.
Okay, thank you, I will.
Any questions from anyone else on this end? Okay, Commissioner Welch.
Just on the background, the roll forward piece, I want to make sure I'm understanding it. The FY 2015 roll forward dollars, it's like maybe $7 million. Were those dollars expensed, and this is just a reporting issue,
No,
or are
they're
they
not
still sitting in the
expensed.
bank
They're still sitting with FTA until we bring this forward.
for 2015?
For 2015. Yes, they did this across the country where they only apportioned about 8/12 of the funds, and then later in the year, they apportioned the rest of it. But as I mentioned at that time, we also shut down the system to allow us to go ahead and do anything with those funds.
So how do those funds tie into our bus purchases?
Well, they will be funding our bus purchases, and we've got some buses that will be coming in, I think this fiscal year. They'll come in before the end of the fiscal year. Those funds will help to go towards those bus purchases and the future bus purchases.
And we're sure that the cash will come forward.
Absolutely. And the way the Federal Transit Administration works is you basically spend the money and get reimbursed on that, usually within 3 days.
Okay, thank you.
So,
Just a second, Bill?
The question I had, just to focus a little bit more on the vehicles, the smaller vehicles. I think I recall that the vehicles that we had purchased, there were significant maintenance problems with them. When we, going forward, are we looking at a different vendor for smaller vehicles?
Yes.
So that would,
Yes, the vehicles that we purchased back in 2011 have not been very reliable. That's kind of an understatement. They're all parked out back. And we are purchasing what we think is a much better, heavier duty, smaller bus. Still smaller, so it can go into the neighborhoods in northern Pinellas County and perhaps in other areas, but a different manufacturer and a different design. Should be better for us.
Patty, you raise your hand.
No, I'm just,
Okay. Anyone else on this end have any questions?
I'm going to wait on my question, because it doesn't even make sense to me, so I know I'm not thinking it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad, just a quick question, follow up on vehicles. Are we looking at more cutaways or are they 30-foot vehicles?
The small buses I'm referring to, and I can't, Henry is there to get answer specific, but they are cutaways. I don't know if they're called cutaways. Henry, maybe you can tell me what, but the kind that we're looking at buying.
Oh, they're smaller vehicles. Is Henry coming up?
They're not the 30-foot cutaways.
No.
Morning, Henry Lucas, Director of Maintenance. The vehicles that we're considering are considered cutaways, heavier chassis.
What manufacturer?
Right now, either a Global or a Turtle Top.
Yeah, I would be
I'm sorry.
wondering
A cutaway is a industry term. Basically, it is a chassis of a truck type, and then the body, the passenger body gets put on that. That's why they call it a cutaway.
Versus what else?
Yeah, what's a regular bus?
A regular bus, like you, our 29 footers and our heavy buses are just called transit coaches.
Well, I know, but
A regular bus is built from the
that
bottom
was an
up.
open hole question.
A regular PSTA bus is built from the bottom up as a transit bus. It never was anything else. These cutaways or body on chassis vehicles that run in northern Pinellas County that you see at the airport are truck chassis by Ford or Chevy that they take away the truck part and they put on the area where the passengers sit. They do that with RVs and other, it's just another kind of makeup. That does not, the useful life of those kind of vehicles, all those kind of vehicles is less than a bus that's built from a heavy duty bus that's built from the ground up.
Real quick, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. You done, Chris?
Yeah, my concern is they're not going to be much better. None of those cutaways are very good. They're just not. But I mean, we've got X number of funds to buy them with. I mean, they're just not very good. They're 5-year throwaway vehicles.
Yeah, well, that's what we learned. Thank you. Okay.
That was really what I was going to ask. I mean, are the qualities of these improving so that you may only have to replace it one time for, so you have 2 replacements versus a bus? Or are we looking at, a third replacement during the same schedule? We're not talking about increasing the service here. You talked about, Brad, having more riders or drivers, and that's the real cost item. But really replacing the big buses with small buses, how many times will we have to replace it in the useful life of a large bus? And what's that cost? So we talked a little bit about including that in our analysis, as we look at bus choices. So continue to encourage that as we look at new alternatives. I think it's important.
And let me just add, on my end, I agree with those things that have been said, but, I think you mentioned that we're approving this program of projects with an overall number for vehicle replacements. It could be 100 different vehicles in this number, because that has not been decided, correct? And you were bringing it to us in this format to just get that part approved. But I think you can see by all the questions from everyone that the board wants to know what kind of vehicles we're buying. So as much as you're trying to make things simple, I think we're probably at some point going to, at least at the committee level, are going to want to talk about these vehicles. So I would say that to you as something to ponder on versus bringing us one number to cover all the vehicles. I think we're all more curious than that. So I just say that we do need to open for public comment. So anyone that, I don't have any cards, but anyone that would like to come speak to the program of projects is more than welcome to do so. Okay, seeing or hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the program of projects?
So moved.
Second.
Any final comments? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item D is our succession planning policy. This was covered in the executive committee.
Do we have to read the resolution?
Before we voted on it?
Yeah, we approved the agenda item.
Approve the agenda item, you have to make a motion to approve the resolution.
Okay.
It's Resolution 1605, a resolution of the Pinellas Coast Transit Authority authorizing the filing of an application with the Department of Transportation, United States of America, for sections 53075, 337, and 5329 grants, and a grant amendments to the Federal Transit Administration Act of 1964 as amended.
Can I have a motion to approve?
No approval.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion or comments on that resolution? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Are there any other resolutions? Okay, succession planning policy. We have
Trish Collins with our HR department.
Morning, everyone. Trish Collins, Staffing and Development Manager in the Human Resources Department. I'm speaking on an action item today. We're asking that the PSTA board approve the succession planning policy that you have in your packets. We did recently present this policy to the executive committee, and it was unanimously recommended to bring it before the board. This policy provides that HR will periodically assess the key components of the succession plan. That's our key positions, our vacancy risk, our high potential employees, and our emergency interim plan, and provide a fully updated succession plan to the CEO twice annually. The policy also provides several ways that the board will continuously be updated on recommended short and long-term succession plans for the CEO position to ensure that the board is informed and prepared for any emergencies or long-term vacancies in the CEO role. It also provides that PSTA University will continue to provide appropriate training in all departments, and also establishes Leadership PSTA as our premier professional development program within the agency. So in conclusion, again, I would just like to ask for your approval on this succession planning policy.
Okay, this was discussed at the executive committee. Commissioner Long, was there anything you wanted to add to what Trish had to say that was discussed at the executive committee?
Only to let the rest of the board know that I think we all were very pleasantly surprised how incredibly thorough the succession planning was, because not only did it focus on the CEO and the top administrative positions, it really took a look at the whole entire agency and provided real opportunities for career paths for almost everyone employed by PSTA. On top of that, there were some very impressive measurements in there to assure that if you're in a position, you're being trained properly and you're also being positioned for the next step in the organization. And I just thought it was remarkable how no stone was left unturned. And I think we all know that in the past couple of evaluations of Brad, the lack of a succession plan for the leadership was a huge issue. And so, Brad, congratulations, because you not only talked about the leadership team, but went through the entire organization. And there are specific measurements and objectives in there for human resources to update them every year so they don't get stale and we don't have to start this whole process all over again in, 3 or 4 or 5 years. So I'm just thrilled and think it's a very big step towards taking the organization into the next chapter of whatever it is that it will be. So we voted on it unanimously. And I would like to move approval of the succession planning as Trish has so eloquently outlined.
I have to go to public comment.
I know you do, but I'm just saying that that's where I'm going to take this after the public comment.
Okay. Are there any questions of our staff? Start time with this end. This end? Joe?
I'd just like to add to what Commissioner Long said. I also was very pleased with the way the plan was formatted. I was pleased with the way that we have not only the top level executives in 4 different categories that can move into an chief executive role if necessary, but also that we have the ability to continue to train and prepare executives at all levels to move up into positions when vacancies occur, and that we have a thorough and complete plan to make sure that there will be no reduction in service or gap in performance in the event that a top-level executive were to leave PSTA. It's an excellent plan. I think it's very worthy of consideration by the board and approval by the board, and we're pleased with the way this plan was put together. Thank you very much for you and your staff.
Thought I saw Ken's hand.
Yeah, I would just add this does check a box. It's been on Brad's evaluations for a number of years, and Trish, we also had a preview of this either at planning committee or at the board. I don't remember where it was, but we did have a preview of it, so I'm very supportive as well. Thank you.
Any other questions at this end? Okay, we will go to public comment. I do not have any green cards, but certainly anyone that would like to come forward and speak to this item is welcome. All right, seeing or hearing none, we'll close the public comment. Motion approval.
Second.
Who was the second again?
Multiple.
Any final comments? All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, we are at the end of our action items. Is the auditors here?
They're not here yet, so
We will
we'll keep
hold them
moving
up until the
forward.
end of informational, and at that time, if they're not here, we will postpone to the next meeting.
That sounds good.
All right, so now we're under informational items. I'll just remind the public that is here, we will allow public comment under these items. First item is the Sustainability Capital Improvement Program. That was covered under the planning and I believe also finance. So I will turn it over to Brad.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. This item, I'm very thankful that both the finance and, well, a number of the finance committee members and planning committee members saw this presentation a week ago together. And so my objective today is to give you some additional information that we have collected since the meeting, that we have put online as well, if you, or you can look on the screen and see just a couple different additional slides that we've added based on comments made at the committees. And then we had a really good meeting, our discussion with Phil Compton and Frank Jackalone from the Sierra Club since our last board meeting, and talked about that. So I want to provide some additional information. My goals of the presentation are, again, to have the board feel comfortable that they have the necessary information they need to make a decision and take a vote next month at your June meeting on the types of buses that PSTA needs to buy. And third, that the board, we all feel like PSTA is doing what it can to be a sustainable organization and help the community fight climate change. What we are recommending, as I told you last month, as we've discussed multiple times in the past, is we are recommending that the board not adopt a bus technology policy on the specific types of buses, but we adopt a sustainable, higher level policy based on the triple bottom line of a sustainability approach. That being environmental, economic, and social. We have been talking about the types of buses a lot. I look back and of the last 12 PSTA board meetings, we talked about this 9 different times. What we haven't talked about is is the broad perspective of the PSTA organization. We focus very heavily on the 210 buses the PSTA owns, but the PSTA as an organization actually operates or funds 454 vehicles around the county. Not all of those are necessarily with the goal of improving the environment. We operate 100, we fund 100 taxi cab sedans. We operate 60 vans through our DART program. The DART program is incredibly important to our sustainability approach, but it is a social responsibility of ours because those folks have no other way to get around and they need transportation, as Commissioner Johnson often says, or else they won't have any transportation. We also fund 25 different Jolly Trolley vehicles, including a CNG trolley. We fund 7 Looper trolleys in downtown St. Petersburg. So in total, it's a much broader fleet and impact on the PSTA services than just the specific buses that we operate. What I'm going to be coming to you next month is a recommendation that's a higher level than the specific bus technology. The reason I'm doing this is for something that Commissioner Janet Long and others have said is technology is changing rapidly. We had a workshop a couple weeks ago where we talked specifically about that, how fast technology is changing. You've gotten emails that, from folks saying that the electric bus technology, the batteries are getting better and changing. It seems like every week there's a different announcement on that. So what I'm recommending that the board take is a higher level approach that allows us to be flexible as new technologies come forward. We would recommend that we would continue replacing our oldest vehicles on schedule with newer, reliable vehicles. For the time being, my recommendation would be that we put in our budget to replace the oldest diesel buses in our fleet with new diesel buses in our fleet. That speaks, I'm going to talk about that, but that speaks to our financial sustainability. Buying diesel buses, at least over the next 5 years, is the way in which we can have a sustainable financial and operating plan. And then last but not least, and this is the point that I want to stress the most, is that it is most important for PSTA to maintain the service to our riders. That, I believe, is also the way we can be the most environmentally beneficial to the community, is by carrying people, having them not drive their cars and instead ride the bus. I suggested, and I'm going to suggest, that we adopt the board adopt a policy of constantly improving our fuel economy. And this chart that is in your packet and on the screen shows in the middle that we currently have a fleet-wide fuel economy of 4.45 miles a gallon. That will increase to 4.6 later this year with the decision you've already made, and then shows different scenarios, no matter what scenario, whether we buy diesels, whether we buy hybrids, or whether we buy electric buses, you can see that the miles per gallon increases and emissions decrease. If you don't burn as much fossil fuels, your emissions will decrease. You can see that on the percentages at the bottom of the chart, actually emissions decrease more than the fuel economy increases because of new regulations the federal government has put on diesel engines that reduce their emissions even more than they improve their fuel economy. Switching now to financial sustainability, PSTA, again, operates 210 buses that I'm going to focus on, but we operate a very broad fleet of 464 vehicles that are going to be propelled by different fuels. That's a given. And PSTA's financial sustainability cannot commit to one single technology, not that we even want to recommend that in this time of changing technologies. After the last board meeting, after our last discussion, I know most of you have also received emails since then. There's been a lot of open questions about the cost of the different options. I get emails about different costing, and we went back and we investigated this to try to get very specific cost information. And I've shared the information that we received in all gory detail, as Commissioner Gerard wanted, during our one-on-ones we've had with many of you. On the screen now, or in your packets, are two different ways we've looked at the costs of operating different technologies. Both the initial capital cost, the upfront purchase price, and then the life cycle cost, which is very important. And at the Planning and Finance Committee last Wednesday, we talked a lot about this. On the initial capital cost, there's been comments, even the comment made earlier by the citizen earlier in this meeting, that the cost has come down substantially on the electric buses, and so they are comparable in price to the hybrid buses that PSTA has been buying. When you actually factor in the base price of the bus, plus the items that we need to buy to make it a PSTA bus, the fare box, the cameras, the Wi-Fi, the real-time, the hybrid electric technology, that does not turn out to be the case. In addition, for both CNG and an electric bus, you need capital infrastructure, one-time purchase of either a compressing station for CNG or charging stations for the electric buses. So you can see that the price for the electric bus of $749,000 is somewhat comparable to the bottom line price of $697,000 for the hybrid bus, but the full cost of implementing a electric bus is about $1.48 million versus $475,000 for a diesel bus. What's more important, though, is the life cycle cost of these vehicles. And that's what we've scrutinized as well, and that's shown on the bottom. Our initial life cycle cost model that we ran is shown there on the bottom of the screen. It uses the upfront capital costs for one bus, and then the two variables, the two most important variables in the life cycle cost analysis are the maintenance costs of the different vehicles projected out for the next 15 years, and the price of diesel fuel projected out for the next 15 years. On the first one, there's been comments made about, and different projections by different organizations on the maintenance costs for vehicles out into the future. So after the last board meeting I contacted some colleagues of mine out in California that operate the most number of electric buses. They sent me a report that they had done by the U.S. Department of Energy on their vehicles that was an apples-to-apples comparison of the maintenance costs. And I feel much more comfortable that we've gotten much smarter on this, on what we could expect with an electric bus, a CNG, or the diesel buses. The other variable is what we've done some further analysis since last meeting. I'm about to show you some new slides that you don't have in your packet, but they are available online. The question came up with the planning committee, well, what's the price of fuel going to be moving out for the next 15 years? And I can honestly say that I know a lot about transportation, but I do not have any clue what the price of diesel fuel is going to be for the next 15 years. We talked at the meeting that obviously the life cycle cost of a vehicle changes substantially depending on where the price of fuel goes. I think Commissioner Welch did some math because he is an accountant and he figured out somewhere around $3 a gallon or something that it might break even. When we met with Phil earlier, we talked about looking over the last 10 years. And so the chart that I'm showing up on the screen is the price of diesel fuel that PSTA has paid over the last 10 years. And you can see it is all over the place. It has recently got down to its lowest in the last 10 years at 90-something cents a gallon. And it spiked at over $4 a gallon back in 2008.
Brad, when you find a stopping point, Commissioner Walsh has a question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, my eyes are not what they used to be. Now, I re-downloaded what's online, and I don't have that slide. So where is that slide online?
I'm sorry, I'm right now emailing marketing and asking them to.
Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay. They just haven't posted it yet, so I'm getting it right now.
Can you email it to us
Yeah, sure.
so that we can access it? Because I agree, we can't. Look at our age, we can't read them all. I don't think it happened. Yes.
So Brad, I was trying to ask you this a couple of slides ago, but in your calculations, you may remember that around about last October, we were meeting, and I asked you if you had had any opportunity to talk with the folks at Duke about potentially partnering with them to help offset some of the cost of the electric battery charging stations.
Yes.
Were you ever able to follow up with them and see how far down the road we might be able to get with that idea?
We did follow up with them several times, and we're going to try again. At least that was the commitment I made to Phil, and perhaps I know that he said that the Sierra Club has had some more positive interactions with Duke recently, and maybe working together we can maybe get Duke to be a partner in this, especially if we get a charging station that they can put their name on in downtown St. Petersburg, right in front of their building. That might be pretty.
I just asked that question because I believe there are several of us that have some nice relationships with the folks at Duke, and I think we all know they have been making an effort to be really good corporate citizens, and I'd like an opportunity to really find out what we can do, because that could have a really big impact on our final decision, right?
It could, yes.
Yeah.
On that day, why don't we let Brad finish his presentation, and then we will get to all of our questions, because I think we're going to miss the point of what you're trying to say.
Okay, well, again, I brought this information to you based on our last meeting. We looked at what the price of diesel fuel has done. I don't know if my eyes are getting worse too, so I don't know if I can read it. The issue is that diesel fuel, as we all know, all kinds of fuel have fluctuated substantially. And on this chart, diesel fuel has been at a price that the electric buses over their life would calculate out to save money. And also on this chart are lots of times over the last 10 years that buying diesel buses would have saved money. The first life cycle cost analysis that I presented to the committees last week assumed $1.88 per gallon for diesel fuel. That is down toward the bottom of my chart, $1.88. It is substantially more than what we're paying today. Today it's fluctuating. Last week it's been fluctuating around $1.25 to $1.40 a gallon. So we assumed $1.88. Is it going to go over $1.88 or average that over $1.88 over the next 15 years? I don't know. The average over the last 10 years, and this is sort of a shot in the dark about where it might be for the next 10 years, the average over the last 10 years has been $2.55 a gallon. So again, this is a new slide that until you get an email you won't see at your places. But we decided to run two different scenarios. As Mr. Compton said, as I think we discussed earlier, I'm appreciative of Commissioner Welch and the county commissioners for considering of funding a charging station, a one-time cost of a charging station in downtown St. Petersburg. That at $349,000, that would be the capital. That would be part of the solution to the capital infrastructure required for a pilot program with electric buses. So I just played out on the top of the screen a scenario where PSTA would buy 2 electric buses. The BP settlement funds would fund the charging station, and diesel fuel price averaged what it has averaged over the last 10 years for 2 vehicles. And you can see the bottom line is the electric bus life cycle cost analysis would be about $2.4 million, and the diesel bus would be about $2.1 million. In total, that those 2 electric buses would cost over the life of them for both operating and upfront capital about $300,000 more than the comparable diesel bus. Then I sort of did another analysis out in the future, sort of trying to see where it might break even. The bottom part of the chart shows 10 buses, $3.30 a gallon average, which probably, in my opinion, might be a little high, but it has been there before. And the BP settlement funding the charging station. And at that point, $3.30 a gallon, if that is where fuel goes for the next 10 years, the diesel will cost more than the electric buses would cost for 10. A little bit more than $11.7 million, and it's about the same, $11.7 million for the electric buses. So again, that's why, again, I think this speaks to the same issue that we were talking about earlier. There's a lot of unknowns. Technology is changing. The batteries are getting better on these vehicles. They're not They are not where they need to be to run all of our buses in this way. That's why I think it would be great if we could partner with the county on these BP funds funding a charging station, maybe partner with Duke Energy that they could help install it. That would save us money. And we could pilot these vehicles with two electric buses in the pilot program. The recommendation that I'm making again, that the board adopt a policy of a fuel economy goal, and then that gives staff the flexibility to look at this every single year, see what the price of diesel is projected for the next year, and make adjustments. Henry Lukasik, my maintenance director, could come to me and say, Brad, diesel fuel prices at $4 a gallon. This pencils out, but maybe we should increase our electric vehicles. Brad, I don't know, they discovered new oil somewhere else and diesel has dropped 50 cents a gallon. Let's go buy a whole bunch of diesel buses. This allows us the flexibility in the future. As long as we're improving fuel economy and lowering emissions, that gives us much more flexibility. Last is sort of the main issue. What I think is the most important function for PSTA is providing reliable service to our customers. The reason I am not recommending at this time to budget for hybrid buses or budget for all electric buses is because we won't have the necessary funds over the next 5 years to replace buses on time. So this chart that is in your original packet, and I presented last week, tries to speak to that by saying, if we decide to go down the road of hybrid buses or electric buses or a mix of those, we won't be able to replace buses on time and our reliable fleet will go down from its current fleet of 210 to something less. If we don't make any decision, which is at line number 2, we won't buy any, if we don't replace any of those 70 buses we need to, we will only have 140 reliable buses and not 210. That will reduce ridership. That will get more people coming to the podium complaining about buses breaking down. And it will keep ridership going down. That's the most important environmental benefit and I think social benefit of PSTA's existence, is carrying riders, carrying customers so they do not drive their cars. And this is a fairly simple way of explaining that. Yes, PSTA's fleet of 210 buses generates about 24,000 tons of annual greenhouse gas emissions, but the 14 million rides that we carry, this year we're projected to carry a little bit less than 14. The last couple of years we've carried more than 14 million. Those 14 million, even if not all of them, but some of them drive their cars instead because there's no reliable service for them, they would generate 25,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions. PSTA is a net benefit as far as lowering emissions, no matter what kind of vehicles we operate, to the community because we give people an option to driving their cars. So again, the math that I produced on this final slide, or this final analysis, shows that if we can provide the reliable service with 210 buses that we need, we can carry the most number of passengers and therefore have the best environmental benefit and a financially sustainable program for our community. We would potentially have a net benefit of 3,600 tons a year, taking out of the air of greenhouse gas emissions. If we go down the road of another path and we don't have a financially sustainable plan, don't have enough sustainable, reliable buses, ridership will go down and our net benefit to the community will go down. Commissioner Welch asked me during our one-on-one that we had, well, Brad, this is a change in what you're recommending compared to where we've been going in the past. We've been buying hybrid buses in the past. What has changed? And as I told him, I didn't think I had a great answer then. I don't know if I have a great answer now, but something has changed. We are now no longer able to rely on federal funds to buy these buses, buy these replacement buses. Without earmarks, with substantially less dollars coming from the federal government, we still get dollars, but not as much as we were able to tap in the past. We're having to make a decision to use our local dollars, our property tax funds, and reserve funds to buy these replacement buses. This is a capital expense, but it almost acts like an operating expense because PSTA buys buses all the time. We are replacing vehicles all the time. Every single year, for the last 30 years of PSTA's existence, and for the next 30 years, we will have action items before the board to buy replacement buses to keep the service running. And it's a new day here at PSTA where we're having to look at our own funds that have historically been used to run the services that we provide, to pay the bus drivers and pay for the fuel to drive down the road and pick up passengers. We've heard this morning calls for improved service. There have been a number of articles in the papers, both in Hillsborough County and Pinellas County, all the time about how we can make the service better for our customers. Since my car has been not having very good air conditioning lately, I've been riding the bus. And I know the passengers on the bus want the bus to come more frequently. And no one that I've been standing at the bus shelter with, waiting for my bus to show up, has asked whether it's going to be a hybrid or an electric or a diesel bus. They just want a bus to come faster and pick them up and take them to where they need to go. That is what I hope we can focus our local funds on providing. Hopefully increased service to our customers, to our riders. More service, more frequently at night and on the weekend. That is what the customers want. New services in Lellman or transportation disadvantage focused services, etc., is what our ridership requires. And if they are not driving their car and they are riding the bus, they are actually improving the environment. So again, this is what you're going to see next month as an informational item today. It's a couple of recommendations I'm going to make take a higher level view of this. Not commit to any one technology, but commit to a goal of improving our fuel economy over time. Always improving our fuel economy. Keep applying and trying to come up with partners to test these technologies and implement these technologies in any possible way we can, whether it's federal grants for electric buses or hybrids like we have in right now that we're applying for, or with the one-time funds, maybe a partnership with Duke Energy. Anything we can do to, again, that will increase our fuel economy, that will lower emissions even further, and we can test that. Below the line is sort of a different recommendation that the executive committee talked about, and I've talked with a number of you about. As I said, last year we took 3 different votes, and they were tough votes on this subject, and the final vote to buy those 7 hybrids was an 8-7 squeaker. We've had 9 out of the last 12 meetings where we've had presentations about this topic. Several of you have suggested, well, is there a better way? Is there a way that we can have a higher level discussion while keeping informed on what kind of vehicles we're buying and always trying to move the agency forward? So it's really an option. We can keep having these discussions, but what I'm suggesting is that we commit ourselves to having 1 vote a year on a capital improvement program. I would present to the board that this is how we're improving fuel economy, this is how emissions, these are the kind of buses we're planning to buy, but you would take 1 vote when you approve the CIP, not 3 or 4. If new technology comes around, which I'm sure it will, I don't even know what it might be, we can stay apprised of that and then adjust our CIP when that becomes available. So that's sort of a little bit separate from the buses, but it's an idea I think will help the board and the organization be flexible, but maybe be more efficient in their discussions about this. I would glad to take any questions. I'm sure we can have a good discussion about it today, and then we'll have another discussion and a vote next month.
Thank you, Brad. As the planning committee chair, Ken, do you have anything you want to add from the planning committee's perspective?
No, we had a great discussion. I appreciate Brad getting this new information back to us, particularly the new projections on different prices for fuel, because that does change the comparison between the different technologies. I have just some comments, not from the planning committee's perspective. Just a couple of comments, just so the board is aware of where the commission is on the BP oil funds that were mentioned. We had a collaborative lab last week, and it was very productive. And coming out of that, we identified top project categories that we want to spend this, I think, $7.1 million on. And in order of priority, transportation is the number one priority, then environmental and economic, community and cultural development. Number 3 is a small project pool of $500 to $1 million, which will be small grants around the county. Number 4 is public safety. Number 5 is community opportunity for facilities for youth, seniors, veterans, special needs. Number 6 is innovative projects, including alternative energy, community education enhancements, and others. And number 7 is our CRAs within the unincorporated county. So transportation is the number 1 issue, and I think funding of the capital portion of electric buses fits right in there. Another possibility for funding out of that category are ferry projects you may have heard of, gondola projects, and others. And number 6, innovative projects. This is certainly innovative as well. So,
And economic.
and economic. So the bottom line is we're still going through a process. We're going to get more public input and try to nail down which projects will fund. The PSTA needs to make an ask if they want to be considered for funding for the electric capital.
We sent a letter to the Chair of Justice yesterday.
Okay. And we haven't looked at any amounts. I just threw out $349,000 because that's the amount you named for the overhead charger.
Yeah.
But the amount could be different. We could even ask the city of St. Pete, I know both the representatives are not here today, they have BP oil funds. They could contribute to that. If it ends up being in Clearwater, we could ask them. I mean, partnership is given in this, and Commissioner Long is correct. I think it'd be great for Duke to participate in this. It makes all the sense in the world. Y'all know I'm a former Duke employee years ago, but they need a PR win, and this would be one. And it is using BP oil funds to fund something that's going to be sustainable going forward. It's a no-brainer in my view, but I made a phone call to them, and Commissioner Long and others have, we need to press that. So if you take out that capital piece, then electric buses are a lot more competitive with the other technologies long-term, especially over the life cycle. So that's just the conversation we've had as a commission on the BP oil funds. You know, this is about balance, and I really appreciate the way Brad has approached this. Having lowest emissions really doesn't matter if you can't get service out to the people that need it. On the other hand, we are ground zero for sea level rise, and we need to take a leadership position in funding the best technology in terms of emissions. So I think we're on a good path. Next month's going to be a great discussion, but I do think getting a pilot of electric vehicles is important, and I think we've got a way to do that. Glad we made the ask for the BP funds. I think that can help us get a couple of electric buses on the road. So that's all I have.
Okay, so let's have questions for staff, and we can come back and do some final comments and maybe consensus direction if there is any. So I saw Commissioner Gerard had a hand up earlier.
I have some fairly specific questions that I can ask you in a one-on-one that I guess I didn't totally understand. And I appreciate the fact that you want to make this decision in years in the future. I doubt that that's going to happen. You know, I think there's a lot of interest in what kind of technology we have, and I'm sorry, we're going to keep asking questions.
That's okay. That's okay.
And making comments, so I am not happy about buying all diesel buses this year, period.
Yes, Brad, thank you. In our one-on-one, you did talk about these issues, and I appreciate the fact that you put a lot of research and a lot of thought into this. And I appreciate the idea of constantly improving our overall mileage category so that we have that much of an improvement. However, as we've heard, if we can get some funding from outside sources for instance, the charging component of electric buses, that will go a long way towards making those more viable. My other concern is purely based on some of the issues with regard to diesel. Even though these new diesel buses are a potential improvement in terms of the amount of emissions that they generate and the efficiency of their mileage, etc., they still are diesel. And diesel is old technology. It's largely funded with foreign oil purchases. It's environmentally not friendly, and it provides, most importantly, a very bad image for us as a social organization. We need to be functioning in such a way that our population views us as forward-thinking, innovative, modern, and we're not doing that kind of thing if we're buying old technology. In addition, if in fact the new engines are more efficient, we change engines about every 400,000 or 500,000 miles. We can put a new engine in an existing diesel bus and pick up the same kind of mileage improvement that we would if we went out and bought all new diesel buses. So from both a social standpoint, a pollution standpoint, an economic standpoint, purchase of a large number of diesel buses is short-sighted. It is cheaper to buy them initially, perhaps, but over the life of the vehicle, we're still driving around in old technology, and we need, in our role as a public organization focusing on social services issues, need to be making sure that we're doing everything possible to be as innovative and modern as possible. So I can't say that we can't have any diesel buses, but I certainly would like to minimize the number of diesel buses that we're putting out on the road. And with all the other innovative ideas that we've talked about here, I hope that we can minimize that in our purchase function as time goes on. Thank you, Madam Secretary, Madam Chairman.
Any other questions? Bill?
Thank you. Mr. Miller, there was a suggestion that when we change out a bus engine, that we possibly could upgrade to the newer, more efficient diesel at that time. Is that a possibility, or is there so much more in the bus that requires us to stay with that version of the engine?
The non-technical answer to your question is, I think you were correct in the last comment you just made, that it would not be beneficial necessarily to just replace the engine on a bus with a lower emission or higher fuel economy engine and keep the bus running for 25, 30 years, because the rest of the bus, which is almost as expensive or to maintain, or more expensive to maintain than the engine itself, still ages out. The tires, the air conditioning system, like my car, all the computers on the bus, the seats, everything on the bus gets older and less reliable. We have very relatively fewer breakdowns on the road today because of the engine, or on the hybrids, or on the diesels we have today. And the analysis showed that the electric buses are reliable. They don't often break down because of the motor. It's all the other stuff on the bus that causes problems, breaks down, makes the bus less reliable.
That wasn't quite the question I was trying to get at. I probably phrased it let me try it again.
Okay.
If we have an existing diesel bus that has been here for 6 years, and we are expecting to get another 6 years out of it, and we are replacing the engine on that through our normal engine replacement, is it possible to go to the new diesel technology at that time, or is that what we do, or do we have to keep the technology of the rest of the bus? I see everybody moving forward.
The short answer is you could. There are many challenges, and it could be cost prohibitive.
Can I add another another question. There's been a reference to prototype, trying to get a couple of prototype electric buses to people to find out what benefits would we have if we have a prototype here. What uncertainties would we be able to resolve through a prototype 1 and 2 buses?
There are lots of questions that I know the staff has about how an electric bus program would work in the climate of Pinellas County and in Florida. There have been some electric buses operated in Tallahassee, but that is probably the warmest climate that any electric buses have operated. Most of them are operating in California in a much more moderate climate, and we would like to see how they perform in the heat of the Florida summer. We want to see how these charging stations work and how that works out. The analysis has shown that there are issues in bringing this new technology. It is still new online. It is getting more reliable, and we would ensure that we would have a reliable system. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily a prototype, because there's a lot of information out there that we've learned from. But I would describe it as a pilot program, almost to demonstrate the value of this new technology to the public, just as much as we're learning from it internally.
Yeah, it's technology available that gives us the most ridership and the least emissions and all that. And to that, and the only thing that scares me a little bit still about the electric bus, which I like, is that the question is there yet a universal charging station? Which is my concern, because if you buy bus A in charging station A, and new technology comes out by bus B or bus C or bus D, you can't get it because you're locked into bus A. That's been one of my big concerns, is the charging station is not universal, whereas with hybrid diesels, whoever comes out with it, we can still pull it up to the pump and put the gas in it. So
yeah.
Are we any closer to a universal charging station for electric buses, so that when we know it's going to happen next year, new buses are going to come out, and are they going to be adaptable? It's much like phone chargers anymore. You're kind of locked into your.
That's exactly right. It's just like your phone. There are different chargers. You need to buy a charger for your phone. You need to buy a charging station for your kind of bus. They're not there yet. There's been some discussion, and I think they will get there someday. The mainline bus manufacturers, Gillig and New Flyer, are now coming out with their versions of electric buses, and I think once they become universal, all the manufacturers, they will come together. Either they'll be forced to by the federal government, which pays for a lot of the buses, or they'll do it voluntarily. They're not there yet.
That's just my concern, is that whatever charging station you buy, you're locked to that bus, for quite a while.
Yeah.
And if newer technology comes out, you've kind of blocked yourself from going in that direction. So that's one of my big concerns about that. I do love the grant money.
Thank you. Any questions on this end? Yes, I have questions and a few comments that I'd like to make. My first point is, it concerned me when Commissioner Gerard made reference to the diesel buses. Have we made that decision? We're going to buy diesel buses?
No, not yet. Next month.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
That's really important, because I think, and I wrote a couple of things down so I wouldn't forget my thoughts. I really believe strongly that as a board, we have to raise our level of thinking and our consciousness about, I think it was Mayor Vivas who talked about the 100,000-foot view, because I would certainly be very disappointed if we made decisions that were penny wise today, but pound foolish for the future. And we all heard Whit Blanton's presentation that he made to us in our strategic planning meeting about the fact that technology is forcing public policy makers to almost be transformational in our thinking in terms of how we view the decisions that we make. On top of that, we know that our citizens, not only here, but in Hillsborough County, have no desire for a sales tax increase. In my mind, that forces us as public policymakers to take a very much more strategic and forward-thinking look about how we use the precious resources that we have right now. Now, what does that mean in reality? We're all leaders here in our community, and I think it's important that we take a very strong position and a very strong stand on partnering with those entities that currently fund public transportation. We know that 2, 3, 4, and 5 years from now, it won't look like it looks today. But you know what? It's not a secret that our legislature is very interested in collaborating, consolidating, and finding better ways to financially incentivize our public transportation initiatives. So to me, we need to be smarter, think in a more productive regional way, and partner with as many folks as we possibly can. And we may be pleasantly surprised to learn that there are a lot of innovative, new, creative ways in which we can fund our purchases. And in the public policy makers that I've talked with at the state and the federal level, that is a huge interest to them, that we find ways to have a very integrated system that crosses county lines and makes a very efficient service for our citizens. And in accomplishing the legislative initiatives that we have with establishing pilot projects instead of this enormous, great, big, huge county-wide project we had with Greenlight as an example. I even hate to bring up that word, but I'm just using it as an example. I think that the success of those smaller pilot projects will help our citizens gain a little more trust in how we make our decisions and have a little more confidence in participating in a very positive way in what we're trying to do. That's a long, long story, but I don't know if we're in a position today to make that kind of a policy statement, that we want to rethink how we use our current funding. Because one thing I know, if we keep on doing the way we always do it, we're not going to be able to be flexible or timely in how we make our decisions. And all of us that have been here for a while know transportation planning, oh my God, it's in 10, 20, and 30-year cycles. We can't afford to think that way anymore. I hope you all agree with that thought process. I think it's important for the future. I'm done.
Any questions for Staff Morrison?
Yeah, I was late today because I went to a City of Madeira Beach commission meeting on the Big C.
Oh, the Big C.
And one of the people there was Rodney S. Chapman, and he was talking about the beach access listening program that we've got. And one of the points that he made to the people in the Big C was that transit could be more positive if it were more frequent. And this is just getting back to what Brad was saying earlier. You stand you're waiting for the beach or waiting for your bus, and you want more buses. You don't care what kind of a bus is coming along, they want to get on a bus. So looking at what he was saying, and I'm saying, okay, so maybe at this point we've got 20-minute or 30-minute buses. But what they really need on that route is 15-minute buses. So all I'm saying is that right now, what we're set with is a situation where the best thing to do perhaps is to buy the diesel buses and look down, farther. And when we get to the point where they're cheaper and other things are making themselves available, then we'll take care of that. But we got to be careful of getting as many bus out as possible.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brad, I think that was a great presentation, and I agree with your conclusions 100%. I think the best thing that we can do for Pinellas County is get the service out on the street. That's what we need to do. I just ran some quick numbers here. If we've got to replace 70 buses over the next 5 years, at today's prices that are listed in here, that's $33 million for the diesel, $49 million if we bought all hybrids, and about $100 million if we bought electric. So, unless money's going to fall out of the sky somewhere, we're going to have to make some realistic decisions here. And I'd just like to make a comment about this perception that diesel is somehow antiquated old technology. I had the opportunity to visit the PACCAR engine manufacturing facility last year, and to see the technology that goes into the designing and production of diesel engines will blow your mind. And to sit here and think that diesel technology is going to vanish sometime anywhere in the near future, we would be seriously fooling ourselves. There are tremendous energy requirements that it takes to move a 40 or 50,000 pound vehicle down the road. And those vehicles are not going to run on solar power and banana peels. This just isn't going to happen. So diesel technology is here for a very, very long time into the future. I think it makes sense to look at these new technologies and do the pilots where we can, when we can get the opportunities to do it. I think the BP oil money makes a lot of sense to try to do that. But to think that we're investing in something that's going to just poof, go vanish is absolutely not the case.
I guess we're kind of mixing comments in with questions, but trying to, how many buses have we replaced the last 2 years?
Not that answer.
And what kind of technology?
13,
was
15?
24.
24.
24, and what was the technology of those?
We buy diesel hybrid.
So, again, I think, I appreciate the comment. I think we're looking, talking about all the different short-term, long-term technology, old technology, new technology. And I think Mayor Vivas brought up a good point about changing technology. Commissioner Long brought that up too in regards to some things that we're looking at. The technology is changing quickly, and we want to make sure we're taking advantage of it and not being hamstrung by decisions that are made too quickly because it might sound better or we might feel better. And I think some of the comments that my colleagues have made with regards to getting the buses, I think you had a slide in here that talked about reliable buses, the number of reliable buses that we have on the road, and the number that we need to get out there, and the number of buses that we need to get out there for frequency. It's one of those things where maybe the frequency, the amount of riders doesn't justify the frequency, but it's like if the more frequent buses are out there, might become more attractive to some riders. And to your point about getting more riders on the buses is probably the number one thing environmentally that we could do. I would agree with that. I think we need to be very careful during this 4 or 5 year period that you described in the past as a kind of a fiscal cliff area, that we need to try to preserve our cash resources as much as possible, make the changes as quickly as possible in this few years. I don't know how many more buses we could have bought in the last 2 years and replaced some of these old buses. So from an environmental standpoint, we could have probably doubled that, maybe not quite doubled it, but we could have had more buses than the 24 that we bought had we gone diesel the last 2 years, and therefore had more of the bad buses off the road, the bad polluting buses. So I just think sometimes we always rise up in 1 year, like this is the be-all and end-all discussion or decision to be made, and yet 2 years have passed, 2 years of opportunities to buy more buses to get the bad buses off the road has left us. And here we are again at another, quote, critical juncture that if we don't do certain things, we're just going to be, I don't want to put words in folks' mouth, but I just think we need to be careful about how we do it with our responsibility to our riders, the social aspect of it, the financial condition of this organization, the people that work for us, the people that ride with us. They depend on us to make good fiscal, sound decisions.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think there's enough concern on this board for environmental issues that the pilot programs are really critically important that we investigate, because we don't know in the long run how those technologies are going to perform, and we are learning. So I think I think that's a prudent way to go, but I really do think we need to continue to try to get the number of reliable buses out there up at a high level, and I think we can do that with the recommendations that you're bringing forward. So I really commend you with the approach that you've used, the openness to the Sierra Club and anybody else who wants to talk to you about the environmental concerns, because everybody up here shares that. But I appreciate that. And thank you for allowing me a few thoughts.
Okay,
I'll make it very short.
questions, please.
The trolleys and the smaller vans that we use, DART and so forth, the city of Pinellas Park put in a charging station. I wonder if those vehicles are able to use the regular charging stations we have across Pinellas County. We use our CRM and put one in.
I don't believe that our current contractors, Yellow Cab and Terroride, have any electric vehicles in their fleets that total 160, but there's a potential for that. We put an addendum in the RFP that is already out on the street to give extra points of incentive to any proposer for our new contracts for DART service if they provide lower emitting vehicles. I don't know if they're going to put it in for electric vehicles that can be charged at your station or not, but to try to get our contractors thinking in the same direction that that we're all thinking in. That's the goal.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions for you. And I probably already know the answer. What's the funding that's being used for the add-ons to the buses? You know, you buy the basic bus, whatever it is, and then they have to add the Wi-Fi and the card readers and all that. What funding pays for the add-ons to the basic bus?
Typically, those are all eligible for federal grant. Those are eligible expenses under our federal grants. So typically, the buses we have been buying have been bought with our federal grants, and the additional cost to make it a PSTA bus has been just part of the bus price, and that's also been paid for by the federal funds.
Okay, so just so I'm clear, are you saying that the purchase of the bus right now, the basic bus, and the add-ons that you talked about are coming from two different funding sources?
They're coming from the same source, exact same source.
But we're not getting grant funding to buy buses, you said earlier.
In the past, we have gotten grant funds, as I stated, and we have funded the add-ons and the base price of the bus, all from the same source.
Right.
In the future, I would expect that to be the same. To the extent that we have federal funds, we do still receive some federal funds, just not enough to buy 70 buses. We will buy some buses with federal funds, and the add-ons and the base will all be together, paid for by the federal funds. If we're out of federal funds and we have to use our local property tax dollars to fund the buses, then the add-ons and the base will be used.
It's coming from the same source, whether it's going to be all grant funding or whether it's property tax money that's paying for it.
Right.
Okay, that's what I was trying to be clear on. Okay, and I think that was the only question I had for the moment. All right, let's open it up to public comment. Thank you for asking. I've got a few cards. First up is Tom Rask, who is using Sully Grass's 3 minutes, so there'll be a total of 6 minutes.
Just give me a second to get organized. I left these papers up here before. Well, thank you, Tom Rask, unincorporated Pinellas County. I thank Brad before the meeting for his thorough analysis on the cost of buses. But there's so much here. I mean, you really want to ask for equal time. There's been so much said here, and I'll start where the rubber hits the road, no pun intended, the ridership numbers, which still have not come up in this meeting. So for the audience at home, let's review the ridership. Ridership for April, total ridership, year over year, down 14%. So far this fiscal year, you're halfway through your fiscal year, Ridership is down 9.4%. And I'm going to talk more about this when you get to the so-called service improvements. The revenue miles have not been cut. I sent you an email the other day where I pointed out that in Denver, even though they have cut service by 19%, the ridership has not gone down. So the whole idea that you need to run more buses every 15 minutes or whatever, that kind of goes by the wayside. Jolly Trolley, down 30% in April compared to last year, down 22% year to date. You talked about somebody talked about the sustainable capital program. I think that was Mr. Miller. Of course, if it's not financially sustainable, then it's not sustainable at all. And you can just ask Cylinder about that, the solar panel manufacturer. And in the beginning of the presentation, there was a lot of reference to meetings with Phil Compton and Frank Jackalone of the Sierra Club. The Sierra Club and Phil were mentioned several times. How do we get in on those meetings? Those of us who are critics, don't you want to hear the other side of the argument? As I pointed out in another email to you, the last post on Facebook that Greenlight Pinellas had, meaning PSTA, was where they said, we look forward to working with critics and supporters alike to help craft a world-class transit system. I made a public records request for what efforts have been made to reach out to those critics. There were no records responsive to my request. It's been a year and a half. And when you think about the Sierra Club, I'm not here to attack the Sierra Club, but there are a lot of misstatements by the Sierra Club. As part of the Hands Across the Sand event, for instance, here last Saturday, which I attended, but that's another story, Mr. Jackalone said that seismic waves destroy brainwaves. I don't even know what that statement means, but I do know it's incorrect. He made all kinds of claims. Mr. Compton here said that they had a human son that spelled out 100% clean energy. No, it didn't. It spelled out 100% clean power. I hope you can all see. I blew up the image, you can see. Power. And that's what it is. That's what this is about for the Sierra Club. If the county can fund charging stations, they can also fund the purchase of a diesel bus. To sort of subtract out the cost of a charging station is just bad cost to the county. So let's not go there with that argument. Also, there have been arguments raised elsewhere, and maybe they were raised here today, that we don't know the cost of diesel in the future. That's true, we don't know the cost of diesel, but we do know that the total life cycle cost for an electric bus is about 70% higher. This is Mr. Miller's own numbers. 70% higher. And as Mr. Scott has pointed out at a previous meeting, their unscheduled number of hours, unscheduled breakdown hours is literally like 100 times what it is for diesel buses. So they're 70% more expensive. And if diesel prices were to double, the electric buses would only be 40% more expensive. They're more expensive. And batteries. Any of you who've taken your car to a mechanic have probably heard that Florida is very, very hard on batteries. I don't know what batteries they use in buses, but it was brought up here that they have not been used in this kind of heat. I guess they don't use them in places like Phoenix. They use them in California, but in coastal areas, not inland, like Riverside or El Cajon or any of these places where it's really hot. So you have to consider how the batteries will perform, and we don't know. So I agree with Commissioner Eggers, we should go slow on this, just every year, try to do the best, make the best decision you can, okay? And so the transit ideologues on this board, and there are a few of them, have to face reality. Commissioner Gerard says she's not happy about buying diesel buses. Well, hurricane season's coming up, I'm not happy about hurricanes. But it's reality. That's what it is in the end. It's reality. So we don't need central planning here. I'm sorry if I sound harsh. There's so much to cover here, and I would love to have these kinds of individual sit-downs that Mr. Miller has with the Sierra Club. He confirmed to me before the meeting that they're not partners of PSTA. I asked, because they're out saying they're partners of PSTA. No, they're not. There's no formal partnership. I would love to sit in on the meetings he has with the Sierra Club. I would love to have meetings with PSTA staff about how we can build a world-class transit system. So again, let's only end where I started. Ridership, halfway through your fiscal year, down 9.4%. In Denver, when they cut the bus service, meaning the revenue miles, there was by 19%, there was no decline in ridership. So do the right thing, do what you promised as part of Green Light Pinellas, which is, you said there will be a depleted network of basic routes. Do the right thing by the taxpayers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. All right, the next person is Barbara Hazelton.
Thank you. Good morning. I just want to cover a few things. First of all, I dug out my copy of the Pinellas bus study from a year and a half ago. And it was interesting as I looked at it this morning because it's all marked in red and earmarked and dog-eared and so on and so forth. I really did familiarize myself with the $700,000 that we spent on this analysis of our bus system. And yet I think that there's some things that we kind of need to be reminded of, perhaps, and maybe I'm wrong there, but page 73 of the bus study said that by increasing investment in its best performing routes while examining alternative means of providing mobility along its poorer performing routes, PSTA can move into the future with continued increases in ridership and increased operational efficiencies while remaining a responsible steward of taxpayer resources. And then also, PSTA's core network of just 7 routes, which were 4, 18, 19, 52, 60, and Central Avenue and Suncoast trolleys, is responsible for 71% of the system's ridership. So we have 7 routes out of the 40, and of course that was something that we talked about a lot during Green Light. And now we see the ridership is down. So it is important, I think it's an important time right now as we're looking to possibly have an opportunity to retool the system going forward. And I do agree with Brad on the, I think there was a very fair analysis that was done on the very different types, the 4 types. However, I want to bring again into the conversation smaller vehicles and how there should actually be a column added to your comparison of smaller vehicles. And if that means that through that comparison, in order to have apples to apples, that you have to replace them once or 1.2 times or 2.2 times or whatever it turns out to be so that it's apples to apples, to give us all a chance to really have a judgment, a value judgment on that form of transportation. Because on page 60 of the Transportation Management and Designs out of California, who I believe are experts, I mean, we paid them $700,000. So I think, and there's no question that she really knocked herself out, her team did, to look in every nook and cranny. And on page 60, she says, while in some instances it is important to continue to operate poorly performing routes to maintain transportation connectivity for certain communities, a substantial amount of cost savings can be achieved by switching to smaller vehicles. Now, if we don't know what those smaller vehicles are, perhaps we could get in touch with TMD because maybe they know what they are. And I don't mean that smart, I mean that truly. These people are every day in the business of designing and analyzing systems. Maybe they know some technology that is a smaller vehicle. Because I would like to stress that with the ridership being down, that not only should smaller vehicles be considered for maybe some communities and maybe Leland, but also for current low-performing routes. We all still see buses traveling around with a few people on them. Maybe that's sometimes of the day. I don't know. We have to analyze this. And if you want higher frequency, then perhaps if you have less investment per unit, And I realize that the drivers are an expensive part of it, but still, it can all, I think that when you get the cost of these vehicles to match the ridership, the demand, it's a lower demand, you need a lower form of a vehicle, which is less cost. And I want to remind you too, am I out of time? I just want to say, the ad valorem can blow up on us again any minute. And so, I think personally, I believe that we're in another real estate bubble, and there's nothing really supporting this economy. And so, right now is the time to be tightening our belts and to be considering other forms of smaller vehicles and more usages across the system. So if everything blows up, we're not all sitting here holding the bag on $1 million buses. So that's what I'd have to say. I'd like to just say that this is the thing, I'd like to see the column added on smaller vehicles so we have a true opportunity to take a look at something that TMD might recommend. Thank you very much.
Okay, next speaker would be Mr. Compton.
Still good morning, right? Hi, Phil Compton is here as well, 1990 Central Avenue. I want to thank Brad Miller for his nimble adjustments to the points that were made last Wednesday at the Planning and Finance Committee by board members and by the public. There's still a few little things that I'd like to point out that I think continue to need tweaking in this analysis before you draw any conclusions from it, okay? One point that Mr. Miller made is that you would going forward make an adjustment in which types of buses you buy based solely on the price of diesel as one basic parameter, controlling factor. And that may sound like a reasonable way to go if the price of diesel were the only consideration. There are other reasons for considering other things. You know, you should know, of course, that the electric bus option today, with the current sources of electricity, there is some net pollution from that, from Duke's sources of coal and natural gas to produce that electricity. It's about 1/4 of the net carbon emissions that your diesel and diesel hybrid buses are producing. So today, you would reduce that. Do we need to reduce our carbon emissions? Yes, we do. Do we need to provide service? Yes, we do. The scenario where there were shown in this example 2 buses with sharing one charging station, that charging station, you should know, can serve up to 9 buses. It may not be practical with your routes for it to serve 9 buses, but it can certainly serve more than 2. So don't carve that particular number in stone and add it to the total as if that is a set factor. That is a very variable factor, very much a variable factor. And we should all remember, of course, that in the fleet mileage analysis, that an electric bus is going to get do better than the diesel, better than the 4, better than the 6, better than the 8 miles that your hot BAEs will be getting, I understand, 22 miles per gallon. So that's not shown there. Please keep these things in mind as you're looking at this. I think it's great, we think it's great that transit does reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of the community for people who ride them, the 14 million or whatever that number is today. You can do better, and this technology allows you to do better than that. 6.3% reduction in greenhouse gases, 1,619 tons. You can do far better than that with this new technology, and you can afford it. Thank you, and I look forward to working with you because there's more than one reason to consider this switch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Compton. I don't have any other cards, but is there any other folks that want to come forward and speak to this item? All right, seeing, hearing none, I'm going to come back to the board and try to sort of summarize where everybody's at. I think what I've heard today is that I think everybody is in support of the actual policy itself. But I think what I'm hearing is a concern that we're going to go all in one direction or all in another. And there are the different views on which direction that should be. You're coming back with a proposal, correct?
Correct.
Brad? Look, I don't want to speak on behalf of everybody, but we clearly have people that want to go in one direction and people that want to go another. And to me, I think what you should be bringing back to us is something that is mixed and balanced and covers all
technologies. I mean, I'm just hearing it from both sides. Now, if you all are feeling something different, let me know, but he's gonna come with a recommendation if we don't try to give him, if we don't want him to change what he's been saying his recommendation is going to be, then we don't have to give him any direction, but I think for a more beneficial meeting next month, we should talk about it. Commissioner Gerard.
What I hear the recommendation being right now is all diesel. So I'm just saying that I don't like that. I would like to see a mix too.
Commissioner.
I'd like a little bit of clarification. I think Brad, Henry, and Commissioner Scott all indicated that the cutaway vehicles are not as well equipped for major runs, and they're not lasting as long as a traditional bus, no matter what the propulsion source is. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that when we hear people saying that we want to get smaller buses, what we're really saying is that we're increasing the amount of unreliable or shorter-term vehicles. Is that correct?
Well, I think the suggestion was to do an analysis over the life cycle cost of smaller vehicles. They are not they're not built as well. They don't operate for nearly as many years, so you have to buy more over the same lifespan of a regular bus. You have to buy more. But we can do that analysis.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, so is there consensus that we agree with the policy, more or less, and we would like, when Brad makes his recommendation, to consider the fact that we have multiple feelings here, so more of a mix of technologies could be a good compromise for us versus going all in one direction or all in another. Commissioner Long.
And before Brad answers that question, I would like to know that when he comes with the policy, he has nailed down the opportunity for our partnerships with, for example, Duke. I think that could be very beneficial to the bottom line cost. And so I don't want to leave that hanging out there so that we're making a decision in the dark on that particular issue.
First of all, I wanted to thank Ms. Hazelton for reminding me, like nobody else, about the bus study that we spent that kind of money on and some of the nuggets that were in there, because I think sometimes I was trying to think back to what we purchased the last 2 years and didn't have that number at the top of my head. So I think that's important. We weren't too worried about there being a mix in bus purchases last year or the year before. And so if we go in this direction of mixing it, I would like for Brad to also present the opportunity cost or loss that we have by doing that in terms of replacing optimally the reliable buses that we need for whatever purpose, whether it's efficiencies or whether it's for social reasons for our riders. We did talk in the finance meeting, and I appreciate Mr. Barkley bringing up that, that other column. I think Ms. Hazelton mentioned it as well, where we talk about just seeing it in, we kind of forget that we're replacing an engine on the diesels every 6 years. Is it every 6 years? Is that right? Yeah, whatever. So there is a comparison that we can lay side by side, and I think that's enlightening, especially on some of those lesser travel routes, because again, we're trying to build credibility with our residents, whether it's the ones who ride the buses or don't ride the buses, and I think it's important on us to continue looking at that. So, whatever we bring, I think the recommendation from staff needs to be what it is. If we go in a different direction, there's definitely going to be some opportunity costs, ones that I'm not sure this organization can afford in the next few years, at least certainly the next 4 to 5 years. So, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted a point of clarification on the smaller bus issue. The cutaway buses those are the ones that are really not very reliable. They truly are 5-year throwaway vehicles. The buses that we're buying now, the full-size buses, are manufactured by Gilly. They're 40 feet long. They also make 35 and 30-foot models. So they are substantially more money than the cutaways, but they're also substantially more reliable. So, you're going to replace those cutaways probably at least probably 1.2 times in the same time that you operate a 30 or 30 plus smaller fueling bus. So I think we should probably evaluate that on the routes that we're looking at to see what, there are some instances where a body on chassis or a cutaway vehicle makes sense. So we just need to understand what route we're buying the vehicle for and making sure that we're applying it properly to make sure that we're getting the best return on that investment. And I completely agree with Commissioner Egger's comment about that opportunity cost of what we're buying versus what perhaps we're not replacing and how that affects us. Thank you.
This has been a very interesting conversation, and I appreciate all the comments of the public and the members of the board. One thing that I keep coming back to is that this is changing technology, and I think what we're being recommended is we're going to have to make a decision each year based on whatever it is pending, whatever the technology status at that time. And I'm not, and I think back to when the green light plan was presented, fuel costs were much higher. At that time, our operating costs were higher. We've done a lot to cut our costs within our organization, thanks to Mr. Miller and the staff. So things do change as we go along. So what I think we're doing is we're creating a structure to analyze the options that we would be applying each year as we move forward. And I think we're getting a lot more sophisticated, and that is a very appropriate process. Thank you.
Yeah. To what I would like to see staff bring, I would like them to bring back the best plan for the PSTA that fits those three components of sustainability. And I think to have a mix, it needs to incorporate all things. I think with, as we talked about, if we have the partnerships in place, with we're not just buying. We're going to buy buses again next year. We're going to have an opportunity, and technology is going to be different. And as Commissioner Egger said, we don't even kind of remember what and how many we bought in the past 2 years, and I think that'll apply next year. But if we don't have those partnerships in place with Duke, or we don't have the commitment of the commission with the BP money, I think it changes the way it looks as to what staff brings us, and I think that needs to be a component of it. So that's kind of my thought on. Can it be a mix? Yeah, if the pieces are in place, it can be, but I don't know if it will be. So.
Okay. I think you've heard everybody's comments. It is an informational item.
That's right.
I think you've heard everybody's concerns. It sounds like everybody's supporting the policy, that it's flexible for the future. I think you've heard the information everybody wants to hear, or brought back to them on the smaller buses, whether these partnerships come into play. And I think you hear, some folks want to go on one technology and someone wants to go on another. It's about looking at balance. Commissioner Welch.
I did have a question on the letter that went out for the DP funding. Did you specify an amount in that letter? Has it gone out already?
I think it went in yesterday. Did it? Rick, do you know?
You just need to sign it.
Oh, it hasn't gone yet. But the letter that it was for $349,000 for the charger. But if you would not specify a number, or?
No. I would get the proper input. I don't know if that's performance management, but 349 was the overhead, and then there was a 40,000 for a depot charger, right?
Right.
So I would tend to make it 389 or 400. We're just making an ask.
Okay.
The commission still has to go through this process. There are other requests, but that will make us less dependent on Duke, who, again, should be a no-brainer that they participate, but I don't want us to hinge on them.
Yeah, you can buy the next technology.
Right. So, and plus there's some in-kind for installation and development of the plan, so there are other places that they can contribute. I would make it 400. It's an ask, and it'll have to be in the midst of all the other requests. The other thing I wanted to point out is that you said as a planning committee, I just want to make sure that Brad is not suggesting 35 diesels. right? This would be, the first batch would be 7. And then you'll make a reassessment for the next batch, is that correct?
That's correct.
So it's not the entire 35, it's the first batch. And I don't know if I'm there yet, because I'm still,
5.
is it 5 or 7?
Henry, you remember, isn't it 5 in the first year?
We're receiving 7 hybrids and ordering 5 vehicles for next year.
5 new ones.
So 7 hybrids are on the way.
Yeah, that vote has already been taken.
But it's not like that whole batch of 35, he's locking us in.
Correct.
I just want to make sure we understood this. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Just real quick, yeah, on the, I think the process that Commissioner Welch is talking about that we're going through, we'll be meeting or getting input from the residents in July. That's the time frame. And one of the things that we said is that we wanted to make this final decisions by the end of this calendar year. So it might be sooner than that. And the issues that we're talking about with Duke Energy, sooner or later, I mean, those are things that we're working on. I think it's great that we're working on all that stuff, but just in perspective, I don't know about the timeliness of everything.
You're talking about the BP?
I'm talking about the BP discussions at the county commission level, and we certainly have had that discussion already, and it's ongoing still. But we're not even meeting again with the public until, I think it's July 12th or something like that. But anyway, sometime in June.